Good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce us first. We're very happy to have Sylvain Levy, who runs the DSL collection and has been collecting avidly in contemporary Chinese art for the last 9 years now. Having set up the collection in 2005. And Sylvain's now an old hand of China collecting, has a very strong interest in commitment to education in China, disseminating contemporary Chinese art to quite broad, wide-reaching audiences, which makes his collection quite unique. We've got Geoffrey Boloten, who is the managing director of ArtInsight, a specialist art company who gather experts in the field for events, panels in the art business world, and also partner with Art Tactic, who track the market on a monthly, weekly basis in different areas of the market, across emergent markets, established markets. Have a huge range of expertise with Geoffrey and as Pip Edison. And I'm Katie Hill. I'm slightly more on the academic side, but I've been working in the contemporary Chinese art field for a number of years, both as a lecturer, writer, and a curator. So we'll pass it first to Geoffrey, and then we're each going to sort of present a little bit of our own perspective on the Asian art market, and then work through a few sort of questions about it that might lead to an interesting conversation about the direction it's taking, its effect in the global art market, and so on. So we'll take it from there.
Great. Well, I think what the best thing I can offer is, apart from these two wonderful people who are very much engaged in China and the market in Asia, I can step back, and sort of contextualize the talk today and look at sort of the market itself, what the developments of the market are, and where it's going. Very much from Art Tactic's point of view, we do survey the market. We speak to collectors and key influencers in the Chinese market, particularly, and sort of we have our finger on the pulse, hopefully, of what's going on and what's to come. So just to contextualize, this is just a little donut view of the global art market. And I think the interesting thing I wanted to point out was China last year, which it has been updated, but it's around the same this year as last year, is the second largest art market globally, and it's 25% of the market, next to the US, which is 33%. I think it's gone up a little bit this year, so it's sort of pretty much up there. It's a huge market. It's a third of the global art market, and that's come really quickly and really fastly upon us. It went even quicker in up to 2011, where it was the largest art market. We had a little dip in the economy generally, which sort of affected the art market, of course. But I'll talk about that later and how that's rebounded very quickly and what's going on. So. These are just some of the, I was trying to put together sort of a little précis of what's going on, what are the developments. Sorry if I'm moving to the slide to look at it. What are the infrastructure happening, what's going on that is fueling what's going on in China and Asia in generally. And the key points, I think, very much are the explosion of art fairs and biennales. I mean, that's really gone huge. I'm going to talk about China more in particular, because that's where we survey the market and research things, but a lot of the Asian markets funnel into China in some ways as well. And there are common things that go on. So art fairs, Hong Kong, we're going to talk about sort of Basel, the significance of Basel, sort of, plunking itself down in the middle of Asia and how that's happening. Also mainland China, there's, huge growth of art fairs in Shanghai, in Beijing, and that's sort of growing and influencing. Also Singapore and Korea, all Asia, there's a biennale and art fair things, which is really much fueling the interest and the engagement and everything else. Also, I think most significantly, in some way, looking at sort of from the Western point of view, is the presence of China and Chinese art in Western art fairs and biennales. Particularly the Armory had a huge focus on Chinese artists this year. Art Paris, Art 14 in London. There's a lot more engagement in the West with Chinese and Asian art in particular. So that's one factor of what's going on in development. Government policy, culture has been prioritized. You'll know more than this, Sylvain, than me, but it has been prioritized as a cultural industry in terms of growth, and that's a big thing, and that's fueling, already the excitement that's going on in the Chinese market. So especially things like the free zones that are happening, that are sort of being experimented with, both in Shanghai and Beijing. But museums, and I think that's a big story, the sort of the growth of the museums and the new build of the museums. So it's 451 new museums opened in 2013. That's a lot of museums. And a lot of the museums that need to be filled. And I think that's a significant point. We've got to put stuff in them, and that's going to be fueling the market in all kinds of directions. They're not all art museums, but there's museums in all different directions in the art and decorative art world as well. I think that's huge. It's about 4,000 to date now. And that's also, we'll talk about that as well, the idea of the public museums and the private museums. A lot of collectors are taking that up as well. Auction houses. Sotheby's and Christie's had 40% increases in their Hong Kong sales. And the significant thing is opening up auctions in mainland China, both in Beijing and Shanghai. And that's a huge significance. That's a long time coming. And they've been desperate to get in there, and they've now got in there. It's slowly, they can only do things in certain sectors, and it's sort of growing slowly, but getting a foothold in has been, I think, a huge, significant thing. And there's huge growth to Chinese auction houses as well, which is, balancing that. HNWI, it's a great word. It's not even a word, is it? It's letters. High net worth individuals. And I think the idea of the income, the private wealth growth, has been a huge factor in what's going on as well. China, the Asia Pacific region in general, has been one of the highest sort of increases in Asian in high net worth individual growth, and that's fueling especially the top end of the market, which you see a lot of the growth happening. So can we get, yes, this is a global wealth chart, just basically showing the degree of growth and how fast the high net worth is going in that way. And the next slide is it's kind of like the regions and who North America took the gold cup in very rich people, which is a good gold cup to have, I think. But Asia Pacific has a huge growth, 12.2% growth, and a number of sort of high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals as well. So I mean that's not insignificant in terms of a factor of what's fueling a lot of the market as well. Also, I think what's fueling the market is the focus on investment, art as investment at that level, and that's sort of having an effect as well. Right. This looks like a very complicated slide, but it's not really. I think what I'm trying to point out here is the sort of, and we'll talk about that more in the panel, I think, is how the validation is different in the Asian markets or the new markets than in the Western markets. How is value created? What are perceived as the important tastemakers and validation factors? In the West, it's very much those factors which are on the top, which are the non-commercial bits. They're the ones who sort of really create value, who sort of validate and have a seemingly detached view from the commercial side of things. And it's the commercial galleries and the private collectors who obviously have an interest in it, which aren't seen that their voice in the validation process isn't as high. In the new markets, I think this is flipped on its back. So the pinnacle is on the bottom in some way, because there isn't the infrastructure. We don't have the museums and the curators that have been established for centuries and have that validation. So it's really very much the commercial aspects of the market that are validating, that are creating the value. So it is the private collectors and people like Sylvain and others who are the ones who have the responsibility to be doing that, because there isn't the curatorial or the sort of the critical mass that's been historic to have that impartiality that's there. So that's what's interesting. We'll talk about that. And finally, what's happening with the market? 2009, 2011, the market quadrupled. I mean, it went up really quickly, and it's going crazy. 2012 had a bit of a dip, and it sort of decreased by 43%, but it rebounded really quickly, because I had 31% the following year. So that is significant, is the rebound, and that yes, it's going to dip. Yes, it was a huge trajectory of growth. It had a dip in terms of mirrored by the economy that was going on at the time, but it really started to spring right back up. And the latest art tactic report we did, which is it's tracking confidence in the Chinese contemporary market, where we go to experts, collectors, gallerists, people who are involved in the market, and there's been a really significant increase in the confidence in the contemporary market and the growth of the market over the next 6 months, which is great. And I think, as a sort of final point, I think that going back to that first slide, you show the tranche of the size of the amount of market share that the Chinese market represents, 30%. That's about $20 billion worth of the art market. And I think you can't minimize the influence that just that fact has on how the Western market is going to be developing in the past. What influences, though, the size of that and the influence of that bigger market is going to have on the art that is produced made in the West, and as well the way that we engage in their traditional way in the art world. Maybe that's hopefully shaking things up a bit and changing the way that we in the Western world also operate. So that's a snapshot of where we are.
Sylvain, we will move on to you.
Thank you. First, thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm very happy to be with Jeffrey, because Jeffrey discovered that I could be a speaker 8 years ago. He gave me my chance in Arco. And it was my first time I was on the stage, and now I'm with him. It's a great honor to be with my teacher. I just want to add something important. DSL is Dominique and Sylvain. And as Dominique used to say, Sylvain S is I suggest, Dominique is I decide. So, Dominique is a very important part of the family and an important part of the collection, and also my son and my daughter will be very soon also a very important part of this kind of family adventure. Your topic made me think a lot, because I think that it obliged me to think on three subjects that I would like to just very quickly put on the table for the discussion after. No, it's the first. No, there is one before. Yes, I take what you have. What is your curatorial theme this year? Is the only thing constant in life is change. And the other thing, this would be one of the subjects that I would like to discuss. The other thing is why Asian culture is expanding locally and internationally. And I will refer to what Jeffrey said. And the last point that I would like to just put on the table and to discuss is what about the use of online galleries and digital platforms in this expansion? And more generally, what is the use of the online, the digital world in the way art is expanding today. So let's begin with the only thing constant is change. I'll be more, I prefer to speak here. It's easier for me to look at. I'll be more direct than that. I think that we are living today in, I shall say, systemic change. I think you even say tectonic changes. And there is two tectonic change. The first one is naturally China. China is changing the face of the world. China in 30 years has gone through such a huge transformation that the whole world is changing because of China. And this has naturally a lot of consequences, naturally on the art world also. But also the other one is the digital world. And what the digital world is doing is changing the human being. And this changes China and the human being. We wanted to, when we began this collection in 2005, we wanted to, let us say, be part of these two changes by collecting Chinese contemporary art and by trying also to bring into the collection the digital world. This is why we have decided in 2005 to create DSL. DSL is something very new for us because we've been collecting for 30 years, but we've never collected like this. We've collected in a very traditional way. But DSL was the first time that we have decided with my wife to ask ourselves a certain number of questions. And especially the question was how to open the collection. You know, the digital world is something not something very new. You know, André Malraux in 1947 already was talking about museum without walls. So we have not reinvented anything today with the digital world. But what is important for us was to open the collection, and we decided to do it in many, many different ways. Today I don't have time to explain how to do it, but the important for us was to connect people with the right tools, the right message. And so we began with the internet because we wanted to connect with Chinese people. And so we made a website in Chinese and in English. Then we went to 2D museum, 3D museum. We went to iPad, we went to ebooks. And now we are working on augmented reality for the future. This was the way we wanted to open the collection. Something what was very important for us was also to share the collection. To share the collection, because that's also something not very new. Marshall McLuhan was speaking about sharing the collection 20 years ago, even before Facebook. And what was interesting for us is that we are today in what I shall call the post-internet age. The post-internet age internet is part of our daily life today. But the post-internet age is about social networks, is about the use of the smartphone, and what is more important also is about the use of viral tools. And you can see here the importance of the viral tools when you see WhatsApp compared to Facebook. And so for us, the idea of using all these tools, of putting ourselves in this post-internet age, is something very important for us. And this is how we also managing the collection by being very, very close to all these new technologies. I will give you some examples of what we're doing. LinkedIn, I have 14, 16, but now I think that I have more than 15,000 people. What is interesting is that it can be a network of 20 million, but I forget it. And this is LinkedIn, how it's the other side. Not the other. Keep on. Yeah, what is interesting? Can you go just before? Just before? Never mind if you cannot. Let's go. Encore. Once more.
What pressure, Clemmy.
Once more. Never mind if you can. Now, what is interesting is with all these networks is you can think local, we think Chinese, and you can act global. And this is an example of how we can, with internet, reach people with LinkedIn from Ukraine, from Shanghai, from London, from, I don't know, New York, whatever, Mumbai, Lagos, whatever. And so this is also very important for us, is to try to reach the whole world and not just to be focused on China or Paris. Also, what is important today is not what you are and what you try to deliver as an image to the people. What is important is how people perceive you, and then also how people after share with the others. And this is also what we're working very strongly on, the idea of how people can share the collection with the others. Okay. Facebook also is something that we are working very, very strongly on. We have 40,000. I think we have 40,000 likes. But what is interesting is you see with other private collections, especially who have a building, Punta Cana, Pinot, or Rubel, they have less. It doesn't mean that they are less good than us. It means that they are not interested by using this kind of tool to reach people. And so this is also very interesting. When you have a museum, you think that you don't need anything else than just a fixed place. Since we don't have a museum, we have to be inventive or innovative. Now I would like, and the result is that today we are among perhaps the 5 most visible collection in the world on the internet. Okay. Okay. Why Asian culture is expanding locally international? I think this is a very interesting, because there is, behind the numbers, there is reasons. And what I want to say, just to put the subject on the table, what are the reasons why today there is such an expansion? Jeffrey gave a certain number of ideas, but I would like to add some others. First, I will begin with this idea. It's no more produced in China, and now it's created in China. This is very important. Today, there is a real Asian culture, which is not at all the copy of the Western one. And this is very, very important. Today, the Asian culture, and if you can give 2 words on the Chinese one, Chinese culture is very unique for 3 reasons. 5,000 years culture behind, it's the mirror of a society, and also the Chinese artists are global. They travel, they are in touch with the whole world. So when you have a blend of these 3 things, you can have something very unique, which is very different from the West one. And I can apply this for the other, for Indonesia, whatever. So this is the first, I think, idea. It's expanding because it's becoming recognized as something culturally relevant. The other idea is the influence of state. In China, the influence of state on the market, on the art scene, is very, very important. It's, I should say, crucial. The first idea for the Chinese people, Chinese government, contemporary art is soft power. The American people have used their culture as soft power, and for the Chinese people, the Chinese government, it's very important that art, culture, and generally art is considered as a main soft power tool. The other reason is that now you have what we call the repatriation of Chinese contemporary art. Many Chinese collectors who became rich because the government want them to become rich, allowed them to become rich. Now they are using their money to bring back the cultural heritage to their country. And so this is why the market are fueling and bursting, because they have this idea of bringing back in their country what they consider as their heritage. The other reason, which is also very important, I think, if it comes, is this, poly-auction. You know that there are now mainly 4 big auction houses in the world. Christie's, Sotheby's, and Phillips, okay. But in the other hand, you have something called China Guardian and Poly. And what is interesting in Poly, to give you an idea of what's happening today, Poly belongs to the government, belongs to the security minister. Poly has a $40 billion asset. And Poly wants to become a global brand. So you imagine the power of the government with Poly auction, $40 billion, they can buy whatever they want. They can buy Sotheby, they can buy Christie's, they can do whatever they want. And they really want to make Poly become a major part in the auction market. So this is the main reasons why today you have this expansion of the culture. And to finally, I will say that if you look at history, always art has follows money and art has followed power. We used to be rich and powerful. We speak French people. Now we are not even followers. We are just on the backside of the road and looking the others, coming. And the result was a few weeks ago, The Economist was just asking if the Chinese people are not the new Medicis. So you see that, but what is very interesting is what Jeffrey said. It happens in less than 30 years. The first auction house in China, 1992, 93, China Guardian. So you see what happened in 30 years in the art world, and how the art world has been changed in 30 years. What about the use of online galleries and digital platform? It brings us to a little bit what we're working with DSL. It's about the use of these new tools of the digital world. I think that first, the art market is just a very small part of what kids call the ecosystem of the art world. And the ecosystem is something very complicated. Thank you, Jeffrey, for...
No problem.
You have the copyright of... what I want to say is that the whole system here is under now a huge influence of the digital world. And it's not just the market, it's not just about online galleries. Online galleries is just a small part of a huge transformation of the ecosystem with the digital world. And to give you an example, I will just give you this for Asia and the importance of the digital world in Asia. Look at the millions of users in the United States and China. Look at the difference. So naturally, the Chinese people will use the digital tools to consume art. It's absolutely sure that they will do it, and in a much bigger scale than the Western people. And I want to give you a very interesting example. Now you've heard about Weixin, WeChat, I don't know how you call it. Now you have auction on Weixin. And this is becoming a huge, it will become also, like Uber has revolutioned the taxi business. You can have today, application like WhatsApp, like Weixin, who can totally revolution the way people will consume art. And this auction house, which was the first on Weixin, was a huge success. And so this is also what I want to tell, is that the world is changing very, very quickly, and the world and the auction market and the market is going to change very, very quickly. I think this is the idea behind everything. Today, we are in a borderless space. And because of this borderless space, a lot of things will totally change in terms of scale, in terms of speed. There is one before. I think. No, the one before was, I just wanted to conclude what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that we are today in a world with changing totally in a very high speed. And I think that as a collector, if we don't reinvent ourselves, we become very quickly obsolete. And since we want to make this collection timely and timeless, this is the first goal that we have decided when we make also this collection. We have to reinvent ourselves, and especially to be linked with the digital world. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sylvain. Well, you've painted a very exciting picture there. This amazingly rapid rise in the art world in terms of its, financial rise in the last even few years, in the sort of 3 years. I suppose the first question I want you to think about is maybe, one is the issue of sort of geography and location with this. I mean, on the other side of the borderless world is places. And Hong Kong has recently sprung up as this, really, really important new hub, but really in the space of about 2 or 3 years. So it's incredibly rapid, the rise of Hong Kong as a sort of serious, people flocking to Hong Kong with Art Basel Hong Kong. Many Western galleries positioning themselves in Hong Kong for the first time. And I wonder sort of how much that's going to have an effect here in London on the kind of, on the circulation of Asian art. So there's this thing of sort of, on the one hand, you've got on Hong Kong and lots of Western galleries sort of eager to get to be located in Asia on China's doorstep. And then you've got, relatively little exposure here in galleries, say in London, of Asian art, although I know there's some very specialist galleries. It's still a tiny sort of tip of the iceberg in terms of the quantity of work being produced in Asia. So just wanted to sort of address that, whether the kind of relationship between Hong Kong as this new hub and maybe its possible effect in the rest of the world, or particularly in the Western world. Jeffrey, do you have
Wow, that's the longest question I think I've ever heard. I think it's very curious. I think that Hong Kong has always been the sort of Western hub in Asia, and it's always been used to that. But it seems to me that there's a move, and I think a lot of that in terms of the art world is because it is the crossroads to so many other aspects of the region as well, and as well that sort of the tax regime and everything else that makes it very attractive to do business in Hong Kong rather than Shanghai or Beijing. But that might change over the thing. I think it seems to me that that's a lot of it is to do with government policy and how that is going to shift and how that's going to shift things mainland, or if there's a rationale for moving. I don't know, somehow you'd be able to tell more. Do you think the Chinese government is looking to shift things away from Hong Kong and diffuse that power base?
The more I go to China, the more I know that I don't know. So just to begin with my Chinese experience, it's just a personal view. I think that there is two things which are interesting. I think Hong Kong is part of China, and if the government of China decide that Hong Kong should be like this, it's they want it to do too.
Yeah.
It's like with the financial market. You have the financial market in Shanghai, financial market in Hong Kong. It's not exactly the same market. And also, to give you an example, the Western auction houses are allowed to make auctions in China, but they're limited by, they cannot do anything, they cannot sell any work before 1949. So the Chinese government is also, using two different type of location to expand its software and its market in two different ways. But I think this is the first thing. But a part of this, I think, naturally Hong Kong find itself in a very good position because it's a place where a lot of people come in. It's a financial place. Many rich people are there. It's very easy to communicate with many Asian people. It's easier to come to Hong Kong from Shanghai than to go to London. So I think it's natural. But what will be interesting is, we speak of market, but I don't think market is the issue in art. I think the issue in art is the real ecosystem. If you don't have a market, it's very interesting. If you see other emerging countries, Russia or whatever, or many emerging countries, Brazil, Russia, why the market is so fragile? Because there is no ecosystem behind. You don't have in Russia, in contemporary art, I think. I speak of contemporary art. I don't speak of I speak of contemporary art. Huh? The collectors, the government is not supporting contemporary art. There is not a real strong support from the Russian collectors to the contemporary art scene in Russia. But you have this in China, and you have this mainly in Hong Kong for other reason, taxes. And so I think that Hong Kong will become strong. But the issue, what will be the ecosystem? What will be M+? What will be the artist in Hong Kong? This is the issue. And let's wait and see.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, one of the issues is these big private museums in China that are springing up in quite rapidly, and the recent one with Budi Tech's museum use in Shanghai, which opened about a month ago. And, the question of sort of what will go into these huge museums, both in Shanghai but also in Hong Kong, and for that matter in Beijing. And it seems to me that the effect maybe on the global market of China, particularly East Asia, will be that there are different tastes catered for in, through the Chinese market coming to light. And I suppose one of the things I wanted to raise was things like, this new exposure of ink painting, for example, in China, through things like huge exhibitions in the US, the Met in New York, the huge exhibition of ink painting in the last couple of years. And so it sort of raises the question, suddenly we're, being made aware of a whole lot of work which not many people in the West actually really understand what it is. So it's going to have a sort of knock-on effect of, how art is going to circulate, what is going to circulate, what the choices that are made for these museums. So what's your view on that? I mean, do you think it's going to really have a Chinese flavour, in the future?
I think that we've tried to look at sort of what are the Chinese art that's being sold both in China as well as sort of in the West, and it's sort of like as a Venn diagram. Someone people know what a Venn diagram is. It's sort of like that work that appeals particularly to the Chinese market, the work that appeals particularly to the Western market, and then sort of an overlap in the middle. The overlap isn't huge in the middle, and there are artists that are very successful in the West, like Ai Weiwei to some degree, that maybe aren't really as recognized in. You all probably know more than I in terms of the actual artists, but there is a segment of artists that are sort of more, and I think it's to do with the art that's produced that talks to the Western audiences more than it does to the Chinese audiences. Maybe the more conceptual arts, the more sort of Western type of arts, or the type of artists themselves. So I don't know. I mean, that's what's happened up to now, but maybe. With globalization, that's just going to be diffused over time. I mean, you sort of see the progression more, Sylvain, than me, presumably.
I think, once again, it's a very interesting case, what's happening with the ink. What is the position of the Chinese government? The Chinese government is very uncomfortable with contemporary art. Uncomfortable. First, it considers it can be, politically dangerous, but also they don't understand contemporary art, and they think that contemporary art is more a Western culture art than the Chinese one. So the Chinese government is pushing ink, and all the biggest exhibition in the West were financed by the government. This is very interesting. So the government is in a position, he knows that the real soft power is contemporary art, because contemporary art is a global language. Ink, you have to be educated to understand ink. And so they let contemporary art, but they support ink. This is very interesting. But I think that thing will change quite quickly, and it's the first time in China that I just came back from China. I had a certain number of, as usual, meeting with people, and it's the first time that I've seen Chinese people telling me that the art of today could be tomorrow a cultural heritage. And it means that the government today will look at the art, and I can tell you from my own experience, bringing out from China is becoming more difficult today. It's more difficult to export art. I think that the government in China is understanding that tomorrow, in 20 years, in 30 years, perhaps they will have to buy back from the Western the Chinese contemporary art. And so they are pushing the ink, but they are now closely looking on what's happening on the contemporary art.
That's really
so, and my last idea is that in China, the most important word is diversity. It means that you will have contemporary ink, you will have traditional ink, you will have contemporary art, you will have a lot of different things. You don't have just one thing. But it's the first time that I felt that something are moving in terms of contemporary art within the Chinese official people.
I think, there's just one more thing I want to raise, which is the question of Western galleries, again, going into Asia. Obviously, it's becoming a huge sort of perception in Western galleries' minds. They need Asia really badly. And I think it's a question of, to what extent that's going to take off as a market in itself in Asia, Western art. And I suppose we saw Calvin Hui, who leads an art fair in Hong Kong, who's now going to do this big art fair in Beijing with sort of Western antiquities, and other galleries going into Hong Kong who are hoping for Chinese buyers to buy sort of Western contemporary art effectively. So I don't know whether you think that time has already come, or whether that's going to take another few years for that to sort of start moving as a market. Because it seems like people are starting to position themselves, but whether actually they've got a few years to wait for actually that market to really sort of develop, or whether it'll do the same as Hong Kong did, which is just go up very quickly. It's an interesting sort of point in time to see whether sort of Western art will actually genuinely trickle into China for the first time, really, as a market.
You're taking this one, I'm not taking this one.
I think that you saw the slide. The Economist was calling the Chinese people the new Médicis, it means that clearly they consider that the Chinese people are going to be the biggest big buyers in the future. I had discussions with people from Sotheby's and Christie's, and what is clear is that at this time they will focus on Chinese art and Chinese contemporary art. Like the American has supported, their artists. I think the Chinese people will support their artists. But there is a huge difference between the two. As somebody in Sotheby's told me, because of the number, even the margin can be a big number. You've seen what happened with the sale at Christie. Kittenberger was bought by a Chinese woman. So I think that they will not, fall in love with the Western artist. And what is going to happen is that the Western galleries are going to take into their stable Chinese artists, and they will sell the Chinese artists also in China and also in the West, because they will ask to the Chinese artist to sign a kind of exclusive contract. Today, if you want to go to Li Song Song, you have to go to Pace. There's no more Chinese gallery. So I think this will happen more and more. The Western galleries will take the best Chinese artist, and if a Chinese person wants to buy it, he will have to go to a Western gallery.
Can I say just to clear that question? Is there an exporting, which I think maybe is more significant, not only of the galleries themselves, but about, and the auction houses, but about the Western traditional gallery system that operates in the West? Is that being exported? Is that being taken fondly into Asia? Are people sort of saying we're going to adopt the Western ways, or is there a new way? Is there any struggle that's going on in terms of Sotheby's and Christie's setting up there, the commercial gallery setting up there? Are they just operating the way they would in the West, or is there a different ecosystem happening there?
From my experience, my day-to-day experience, I think that we have a lot of different cases. The only thing what I can tell you is that the galleries are becoming more professional. It means that they really want to control their artists, and their artists cannot sell anymore directly from their studio. It's becoming more difficult for the quite well-known artists. So I think that this kind of model is getting into China, the Western model. But also, Chinese people are very pragmatic. They will always build their own model, and they will find their own model. I'm sure that will be a model between online and physical. I'm sure that there will be a model where there will be a lot of agreement between Chinese galleries and Western galleries. And I think this would be the... but I think things are moving in a certain way, in a global way. It's more difficult for me to buy directly from an artist. Unfortunately. Or fortunately, because as I said to an artist, even Picasso and Bacon had a gallery. So it's better for you, and even better for me, if you have a good gallery, because I know that you will last. And if you don't have a gallery, you will be perhaps a shooting star.
Well, thanks very much. I think we'll open it up to the audience at that point. So are there any questions?
Just to start thinking, can I ask a question, Sylvain, if possible, once we're just warming this up? The online side I'm really fascinated by, because we, our tactic and Hiscox Insurers, we did an annual report on the online art trade and what's going on. And it's kind of like, I don't know, I don't think we have a handle, there's a handle on what's going on outside of the Western markets in terms of the commerce that's going on online. Is there a Chinese, equivalents of Artsy or ArtSpace that are, or art online auctions that are happening, or are they able to embrace the Western ones? Sorry, that's a hard question.
It's never a hard question. Always good question. It's the answer which could be bad. I think, China is in the process. It's a world which is every day you have something new, The online gallery is something very new. The economical model of the online gallery today, we don't really know what's behind, if it's really working or not. I think we don't have in China, I don't know exactly the equivalent of ArtInsight in China. I don't know exactly one.
I don't think there is.
I don't think so. But, I think that what's happening with Weixin could be something very interesting in the future. Because Weixin is nearly 400 million people today, And today, I know an artist, personally, who only sells through Weixin. When he has finished a painting, he put it on Weixin, and 2 hours after, it's sold. And
amazing, isn't it?
This idea of new way how people consume art and communicate, which is not the internet. I told you, we are today in the post-internet age. Online, for me, is the internet age. What will be interesting is what happened after, in terms of the post-internet, and how the post-internet will be used to consume art. This is what we're trying to look with DSL. We really look at we spend a lot of time to see what is moving in the way art is consumed, especially through the social networks. And I think this will be the next revolution, more than just a new art sign. This will be the next revolution. But I'm sure that I will be wrong.
We'll see. It's on film now. We're going to be testing you in 10 years' time. So.
If I come back in 10 years, I'll tell you if I was wrong or right.
Test you.
You should invite me in 10 years.
No, that's right. Okay, now we can open it up to the audience.
Yeah, now you can.
Yeah.
Hello. If you got a collection online, how would you curate your collection online?
We curated a collection online.
How? Because such a gallery got 100 days, 100 curators, that kind of thing. Do you think you will do something quite different from that? Because you got the online platform.
It's very interesting. We've done something which has a huge success. We recreated the Grand Palais in 3D. Recreated in 3D the Grand Palais, and we asked. Let us speak French. We asked a curator, Martina Chechan-Coppel, to curate an exhibition of our work in the Grand Palais. It was a real curating. She chose the work, especially big installation, and she recreated in 3D. We recreate. And what's very, very interesting is that the camera, she made, the path, and the camera, and she said, on this work, I want you to fix this part of the work, on this work. And so it was a 20-minute film, but what was interesting is that it was in real 3D. It means that with glasses, you could see the works in the space. It was a 20-minute film. And I can tell you, it was a huge success, So you can curate, you can absolutely curate online an exhibition. And just to finish with this idea of curating, when we made our new book, which will have you have a digital version of the book, but also a printed one, we asked Martina to curate the book. It means that we gave her the works, and she decided to curate the works, the collection, as if she was going to curate an exhibition. So I think that you can absolutely curate online, and what makes the difference is if something is curated or not curated.
Yeah.
Sylvain, how important is the physical quality of objects to you? Because here we are in a place on Dover Street, a very nice gallery space, a place that clearly believes in physically encountering art and seeing it in person. Now, lots of collectors you speak to love the idea of possessing the object, but what you seem to love is the idea of spreading the experience digitally. So I'm wondering, how excited are you by the physical objects that you collect?
First, we don't have just a collection of images. And all the works, we have them. It's important because people, I was in a discussion with a very important American collector. At a certain time, he said to me, you just have a collection of images. I said to him, if you want to loan the works. No, I think what is important is that two things. The digital world is another type of experience. Is every time, everywhere, everybody. The art has been diffused by the books. Who knows who has seen the Guernica of Picasso? You have to also. The digital world is just another way to present something. Also, it's true that you will never have on a 7-inch screen the same feeling that if you see a piece of 40 meters in front of you. And it's not. You should never compare the two. It's two different things. It's like going to listen to go to see a singer on a stage and listening to the music in your home. But what is interesting today is that you have fingered the most important idea. Today, art is not just about object. Art is about experience. And with the digital world, you can bring a lot of different experience. Because online, you can bring a film showing how the work was processed. You can bring a lot of different experience. But I'll have to be very clear. The more we go digital, the more we need museums. But the most important thing is, what is the definition of a museum today? What is the definition of a museum today? And the definition of a museum today, for me, has totally changed of what it used to be 10 years or 20 years ago. People go to the museum not at all to experience art as they used to do it 20 years ago. And so we need museums, but museums which, are relevant of what people want, but also we need digital world. The digital world for another type of experience.
Any other questions from the... What is it?
I just have a brief question about what you think of the digital art market. Not just talking about, platforms for, disseminating or sharing or experiencing art online, but actual artists using digital tools like not just video, but interactive, generative artworks, and whether there's a market in China or if that's even developing in the West at this point.
Oh, gosh.
Katie, you start off.
I'm not sure about the market for it. I know that it's a very active part of practice of artists actually using the internet in their works. And in fact, when I curated an exhibition in Beijing, I took 2 digital artists from Britain, from the UK, to show their work. And one of them does sort of internet chat room data, and he draws it into a live kind of sort of visual display which moves around with the words sort of swirling around like a sort of kind of weather pattern thing. And in fact, that work was hugely popular in Beijing. I mean, it drew in a lot of people's interest, partly because people are so avidly active on the internet in China that they could see the potential for using, live data in artworks, which is quite interesting. Of course, it's, as Sylvain said, I mean, it is sort of relative to the West, incredibly active, the internet sphere in China. So I think, I mean, in terms of sort of market, it's more that there would be editions of those works produced like as in video work. I mean, they're more difficult, but they can also be used in public sphere quite successfully. And I think Chinese cities would be the ones to take up this kind of digital artworks, because there's huge, spectacular buildings. You can display digital artworks in the public sphere. So, I mean, there's quite a lot of potential for it to go into really exciting, quite sophisticated stuff, I think, which is very technically, demands a lot of kind of knowledge of technology and software and programming and all this stuff. So, but I must say I don't really have a view of the market for it as such. I think there's quite a lot of market for things like animation video, which is rising quite rapidly in China. Yeah.
In terms, I can just inject in terms of the market, because I tend to look at the market for photography, and also new media comes with that, and there are sectors that are they're sort of non-traditional in the traditional art market, and have been very difficult for the art market to deal with in terms of that. And I think that's where the great opportunity in the new markets are, like China, because they're not as constrained or tied into the traditions. There's no auction house sector. The Sotheby's doesn't have a new media department yet. But I think that kind of thing, where you're not constrained by the traditions of your history, you can, the new regions can start really fresh. And I think the market is actually much more interested in technology, and doesn't have that stigma that maybe the Western markets have about whether it's art or not. I think they can fast forward through all that sort of snobbery stuff and just go straight to, hey, this is interesting. We want to do this, and we're interested, and not have to deal with all that sort of resistance.
I shall say, as a collector, as for us, we've collected a lot of digital works for two reasons. First, I think Chinese artists express themselves in a very strong way through digital medium. Painting was not the first natural medium for the Chinese people. And especially the Chinese people are, the schools, the media, new media schools in China are very, very strong and very, very, very high level. This is the first idea. You have, artistically speaking, something very interesting in the digital. The second reason is that because nobody's looking at digital, you can collect incredible works at very low price. Incredible works. So once again, what is interesting in art is to be out of the box when you collect. If you collect like the others, okay, it's okay. But all the biggest collections in the world were always made by people who were looking out of the box. And especially in China, looking out of the box means looking at the digital work. And the last but not least reason is you've seen the young baby at 2 years old using his computer. What do you think this generation in 20 years they will look at? Do you think they have to look at paintings, or they will look at moving images? This would be an interesting challenge to see. What will be a relevant collection in 20 years? And this is the biggest question if you want to make a timely and timeless collection.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I believe that we're here also to talk about the Asian art market in general. Do you feel that artists from other Asian countries have the potential, at least, to achieve some of the success of the Chinese artists globally, over recent years? Or are there maybe social or political factors which mean that people just see China and the art made in China as much more significant? Do you I don't know if you, for example, Sylvain, have collected art from other countries in Asia, but perhaps you can tell us what you think. Thank you.
You begin.
Oh, no, that's not fair. It's an interesting one. I suppose I think part of the issue is if you look at that donut graph at the very beginning. China 30%. You don't see Indonesia or Korea or in that, and that's partly because they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the big auction houses, and it all funnels through China, and that's where the thing goes. So that's why I think you don't have that visibility. But partly it's a cultural thing. I think the global art market, has particular sort of fickle in where they find their interest, and maybe things that are, big and powerful are more interesting somehow. I don't know, it's that way. But there is absolutely a huge amounts going on in Korea and Singapore and in the art fairs. When I went to Seoul, I was absolutely shocked. It was a really sophisticated art market. But I suppose they're more regional markets. They're not out there on the global international stage. But they're very strong and quite big and quite amazing but a more regional, and maybe that's a more real place for it to be.
Yeah, and India is a really big emergent market. I mean, it's a huge world in its own right, really. I mean, but it's just sort of outside our expertise. But when I was in Hong Kong, I was at the Modern Asian Art auction, Sotheby's, and in fact there were a couple of records for Southeast Asian artists, Indonesian and Malaysian art. So I mean, that's another significant emergent market, which in Hong Kong, has the ability to sort of galvanize that market as well, because of course people can go from Indonesia, Singapore, anywhere. So there's quite a lot of mobility, I think, through somewhere like Hong Kong with other parts of Asia. And Singapore is quite strategically placed, but obviously India is going to grow, really significantly, as well as China in parallel to it. And it's extremely sort of active market. So I think you're right. I mean, I don't think it's just China.
And that harkens back to what we're talking about too, which is the importance of government public support. India, there's none. I mean, there's not a museum. There's absolutely no support. They wouldn't even pay for it. They were offered sort of a pavilion at Venice Biennale, and they went, nah. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you're at all interested in building your art market, they're not. So that has a big effect, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think that ties in with what Sylvain was saying about the heavyweight sort of support of the Chinese government behind the cultural world, which is being reflected in Hong Kong directly as well. Sort of 45 billion into West Kowloon M+ as a sort of new project into the future. So yeah, I mean, it is.
I shall just add one thing. I think that what is interesting when you discuss with a Chinese artist, he tells you that he wants to be an artist, not a Chinese artist. I think that today you have global artists. Artists are becoming part of the global world. You can be, and what is important is who is behind you, who are the tastemakers behind you, supporting you. It's not just about your nationality, especially if you try to pitch the whole world and you try to become an artist, a global artist. Then you have artists who wants to stay regional because they are very happy. Somebody once said, tell me I'm not interested by a Western gallery because already I have 1,500,000,000 people to convince. So I don't need to convince other people. But you have artists who will stay original, and they will only be supported by if there is, the regional support, means the collectors, the government, and the curators, and the museums, and the critics, and the market, and all the ecosystem. So you will have two types of artists. And now we just focus on Chinese artists. It's a small niche.
And also some Asia gallery go abroad, like Korea gallery called Unreal. They used to also have different branches in, just a comment,
Beijing.
in China, Beijing and US, New York. So it's not about the artists, also the galleries who go internationally.
It's true.
And I also really want to contribute an example like online WeChat auction. Like, you know, the artist Li Bingyuan who who sell his effort on WeChat.
Absolutely.
It's got wait listing, so the bidder who win the auction kind of hold a bunch of books and ask the artist to hold up him. I think the interesting about post-internet art is that it can bring in social engagement and the participation of the public, so you kind of bridging the online and offline experience. So that's how we say, like, new sculptures and new performance is not only about digital things. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, because when there was the first auction on Weixin, what was interesting is that people were not just putting prices, but they were also putting their emotions. They will say, it's good, not good, There was a kind of debate on the works, and people were expressing their feeling, their opinion, and not just a price. So this is also was very interesting by the use of this kind of social networks. It brings you a new types of response, which is not just about the market, but also about people commenting. It's like everybody's commenting a kind of match.
You are kind of collecting the likes.
The likes, yeah.
The comments, just like Facebook.
Yeah, and it was very interesting.
Have you downloaded the app in your phone?
No, because I've heard about it when already it was finished.
Okay.
But I know the people who made the auction. Flying Group, I know them.
Sylvain, I'm just wondering, as collector, do you have particular strategy in collecting, or it is changing and developing every year? And do you have advisors? Thank you.
It's a long question, and I don't think that
We've got time.
It's like a speed dating. How many minutes I have? How many minutes to try to summarize? No, I think we have a very strong, very clear strategy. Very clear strategy. To tell the truth, we've been collecting for 30 years without any strategy. The only strategy was about collecting objects, and with the DSL we have a very strong strategy. In one word, the strategy, we want to make this collection timely and timeless. The idea was, when we look at the collectors' collection, they disappear with the collectors. Either they are put into auction, either they are given to a museum, either they are frozen like the Peggy collection. Which is not the case of a museum. A museum keeps on being active even if you change the director. So the idea for us is how we can build a collection which can actively be transmitted and actively continue even if you are not here. And so 6 years ago we asked people from the luxury model, from the art world, from communication marketing, to write us a white paper on how to make a collection timely and timeless, and especially how to create a very strong cultural identity which can become a brand. So all what we're doing today is focused on that. Transmission is very clear. It will be transmitted to my son and my daughter, and they will be even better than DS, because they are the product of the 21st century, and they speak Chinese, and they went to China, and they lived in China, so they have a much better contact with the Chinese people than us. And the idea is how after they can continue. So this is the strategy. And then after how to implement the strategies, tomorrow is another day.
So when we read about the Chinese art market, we either read about Chinese people interested in buying into their own heritage, or we read the excitement of the influence of new Chinese bidders in the Western auctions. My question for Jeffrey and Casey is, how unusual is Sylvain in being a Westerner looking the other way?
need crazy people.
Well, I think he's unique.
Thank you very much. My mother was. It's filmed. I will send it to my mother tomorrow. She will be.
It's incredibly unusual because obviously one is interested in one's own cultural heritage. That sort of makes sense. And I guess from a Chinese perspective, the big league is the Western market, so that's where the sort of things. But looking the other way, I think Sylvain's very much you're just looking for compliments here now.
Oh, that's nothing.
You planted him.
Sorry, I'm just.
No, I think Sylvain was very much a pioneer in terms of in terms of his collecting behavior and looking the other way, and it's incredibly brave. And I think you have to be very sensitive to that. To what's going on in the country and to get the art that's going on in the country as well before it's sort of explained to you.
Can I tell you a small story because it's interesting? When we began to collect Chinese contemporary art, I went to see my friends. At dinners we discuss everything and especially art. And they said to me, "Oh, you're going to collect contemporary Chinese art? It's a kind of regional and exotic art. What are you going to do? You're going to lose your money." I said, "Okay. If I want to lose my money, I lose it." And in 2007, it was the boom of the Chinese contemporary art. So at all the dinners, they were there and said, "Oh, you're a genius, you're a visionary, give us some advice. We really need to follow you." I said, "No, it happens to be like this." 2008, it was the crash. They came to me and said, "I told you you're stupid." Same people.
That's right. Yeah.
I told you were stupid to buy Chinese contemporary art. How much you lost? And so, this is why. When we begin to collect Chinese contemporary art, it's true that not many Western people were looking at that. But, we were just following Uli Zig and many others. Wulens, we haven't discovered, the wheel. We're just following other people. And we're following other people because we found that what was happening in China was interesting. Perhaps if I went to, another part of the world, perhaps I would have collected something else. But I think what is interesting is that it's always like this a little bit. If you look at the French, they never collected in being the Impressionist. It was the Russian and the American. So it will always, the Western, the other people, the foreigners who look at your art in a different way. And so this is also very interesting, is the fact that always there is a difference between how people inside look at what they are connected to and the others. But lucky we choose the right country.
That's right. Any more questions? Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. The cameraman is that.
I know.
Yeah, cameraman, sorry. I just happen to have a master's degree in digital assets and media management in King's College London. And, and we study a lot about the museum and galleries industries. And we learned that just like the British Museum and National Gallery, they use a lot of the really advanced technologies like Web 2.0 and the metadata, cloud, and crowdsourcing like that. But as far as I know, in China, in terms of this kind of technology side and the citizens, they don't really have this kind of atmosphere or the environment to contribute their findings or to really use this kind of new technology for museum enjoying the museum or to enjoy the galleries like that. So do you think that possible that China can keep pace with like the UK or the Western like that? Or if it is possible, how long does it take, you think?
Ooh.
That's a definite Katie question.
I think that's a really interesting question. You've pointed to a good, nice sort of little observation there. I mean, I think museums in China are directly getting specific expertise from Western museums, so they will be working together with, the V&A, the British Museum, National Gallery, and they'll be very focused on developing that kind of technology. I think there's not really a culture in China of that sort of very clear-cut sort of information-based visual interface, which is quite interesting, because websites in China are often very, very text heavy and sort of really messy and hundreds of things all over the page. And that's a whole kind of culture in itself, the whole design culture that's got to come into China. And I think it'll probably happen fairly quickly. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's incredibly adept at taking up technology, as you know. So I think if you give it another 5 years, it will be starting to emerge in enormous collections in China, particularly through things like digitalization of huge national libraries in Shanghai and Nanjing, and sort of, national archives, as well as the sort of visual side of things through the leading museums in China. So, the National Art Museum in Beijing, or the Shanghai Art Museum, that kind of thing. And presumably once that's happened, it'll just get replicated, across into the sort of contemporary art world. But interestingly, I think the Chinese digital sort of platforms for art are strongest in the journalistic end of things, like ArtSpy, huge portals, web portals, where they actually are already really well organized. They have very strong structure, they have visual content, and they're very interactive. So that's the kind of model that's already been taken up, I think, in the art press side of things. Yeah, but it's a really interesting point. Yeah. Any further questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you to Sylvain and Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Interesting.